But in terms of where she starts in the story, she's not. She's part of the machinery of empire. And one of the other things I wanted to do was to suggest that a lot of us are part of the machinery of empire.
Welcome to the Skiffy and Fanty Show.
Highway rest stops, dangerous fungi, and the perils of delivering the mail with Kate Elliott.
I'm Sean.
I'm Paul.
And today...
And I'm Kate Elliott.
We are joined...
Wait, oh, sorry. Was I not supposed to say that yet? Oh, I interrupted. I'm so sorry. I'm not really, but I'll just say that.
You're fine. We're joined by a special guest, which is Kate Elliott. Hi, Kate.
Hello. Now I'm coming in on cue. It was like walking onto the stage at the wrong time. Wait. I missed my cue.
You know what's wild? Every single author we've had, I think, in the last 3 months has done exactly this, which suggests to me there's something wrong in our script that we need to fix, because we're given the wrong cue, I think.
I think it's because it's like, I'm Sean, I'm Paul, and then you feel obliged to say, hi, I'm Kate, right? As you know.
I think we need to change
sense.
our script going forward.
Yeah.
Michelle Daniel.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we'll see. Well, in any case, Kate Elliott has been publishing science fiction and fantasy for over 30 years with a particular focus in immersive world building and epic stories of adventure and transformative cultural change. She's written epic fantasy, space opera, science fiction, young adult fantasy, Afro-Celtic, post-Roman, alternate history fantasy with lawyer dinosaurs. Her work has been nominated for the Nebula, World Fantasy, Norton, and Locus Awards. Today, we're here to talk to Kate about The Witch Roads, the first volume of a fantasy duology that came out in June and will conclude in November.
But before we get into our discussion with Kate about The Witch Roads, a reminder to our listeners to please share your questions and comments with us at skiffyandfanty.com/listener suggestions or contact us on social media. If you aren't already, join us on Twitch for Sean's Alphabet streams every Friday at 7 p.m. to be part of our interactive live streaming show format. If you're listening to this live, you're doing that. Good for you. Finally, be sure to review and spread the word about our show. Please support us through our Patreon and be part of our Culture Cinema polls, live watches, and other special Patreon-only events on our Discord.
All right. So, first big question. Tell me about your main character.
Ellen.
Oh, my main character. So, one of the things I wanted to do as I was working in the early stages of writing this and conceiving how I wanted to go forward with this universe, which is a new universe. It's one that I haven't published anything in previously, is that I wanted to write some stories told from the point of view of the little people, the people who in most stories or on screen, you only see in the background. They might have one line. They might die. So that's the hero, the important heroes who are at the center of everything, can be upset or can just barely get away while someone else loses their life. And that is where Ellen comes from. So she is a not important person. That if she were to drop off a cliff, the empire in which she lives would happily go along without even a skip, with nothing. Nothing would disturb it. A few people would be sad. Like anything happens, right? But she doesn't on the whole, play a role in the power, the politics, the intrigue. She's just simply a side character. So, and in the book, she happens to get pulled in to an event, something that has to be done. And so in another story, I could easily have told this story from the point of view of the people in the prince's party. There is a prince, either from his point of view, from someone in the party's point of view, these people in the center. And at some point in the story, they would have pulled in this deputy courier and said, oh, you can get to this place you need to go using this person as a guide. And they might have functioned as a comedic sidekick or a person who, as I said, someone who dies at some point or someone who does their duty and gets like one or two lines. or someone who really doesn't say anything at all. And the story, in that sense, wouldn't have changed. I mean, I could have written essentially the same story without it changing, but I wanted to tell it from her point of view, because that alone to me changes how we see the story.
Yes. And I'm glad that you've approached it this way in answering my question, because literally right now I'm gearing up to watch House of the Dragon season 2, which is overwhelmingly the story you didn't write, which is about the people primarily in positions of power. And throughout that show, this is not shade on the show per se, but throughout that show, the sort of common people, the everyday person, really isn't important. And in fact, half the time they're just CG characters that get mushed by dragons. And so it is very interesting to sort of look at the story from the opposite direction, from somebody who has considerably less power, and to see, in this case, an empire from the perspective of someone who has limited ability to really change much and is at the mercy of those who, like the Prince Regent and his glorious buttocks, as is shown to us at one point.
Well, he's not a Prince Regent. He's just a prince.
Twice, actually.
He's Prince
Right.
Warden, isn't he?
He's Prince of the Third Estate, which is a status marker of where he stands within the hierarchy of princes. And then his title, he's Prince General of the Imperial Order of the Wardens. But he's not a regent. He's
No.
He's not
I mean, some of the stuff I focused on in this book, of course, is all the world building, especially around the empire that we're seeing kind of from the outside, and how this prince and his rival are kind of feuding because the heir is useless, which is I find amusing. But so you could definitely have written this book from the prince's point of view up to a point, and then you'd run into the haunt, and then this book would be very different. I'm trying to wrap my brain around the idea. You'd have to write it almost schizoid, because, well, I mean, it's not that much of a spoiler because it happens pretty early. The haunt comes and, takes over the prince, and then we basically have a new character. You submerge the prince into this character who gets along much better with Ellen than the prince does, because the prince is fishy as jackass, pardon my language.
Well, I mean, he is, but he's also from that level of society. So he's behaving perfectly as he should for that level of society. Other people might see it differently than that. And I'll note, there's actually two things I want to note here. One is that Ellen is not actually an outsider. She's she is.
That's kind of a spoiler too.
That's a backstory thing. Let's leave that for now. But in terms of where she starts in the story, she's not. She's part of the machinery of empire. And one of the other things I wanted to do was to suggest that a lot of us are part of the machinery of empire. We don't have any particular influence on it. We try to lead our day-to-day life as well as we can, with the things that matter to us. And you see that in how she behaves as a deputy courier. She knows people. She delivers messages, but she's also, she gets to know the people on her. It's kind of like a glorified postal route, right? So you can see that she has a way of interacting with people, and she has a way of using her role to do as much, I don't want to say as much good as she can, because that sounds a little cheesy, right? But she lives life in a way that she feels is true to how she thinks people should be treated. But she's part of empire. She assists empire in its way because she's doing all this delivery for empire. And then the other thing is the people in the prince's party. One of those other people, it's correct about the haunt. But one of the other people in the party could have been a point of view, and they know the interactions, this inner palace much better. Because they're all involved in it, or they're involved in what's going on among the wardens or any of that. But I just didn't want to go there. I wanted to take someone who knows things because she's well read and she's trusted by her immediate supervisor, the intendant, whose name we never learn, by the way. I don't know. I find that I like to do that with some characters. They're too important for people to know their name. Something that we don't think about in the United States that much, or probably not in Australia either, because they're more kind of on the surface egalitarian societies. But yeah, I really, really wanted to see it all from her lower position. And also, of course, because of that major plot element of that this is one person, but now it's another person, but it's the same person, but it's not the same person. That has to be seen through her eyes.
One of the things that has come up in this, which I found very, very interesting in this book, was the level of detail you provided about the different layers of power and the sort of rigidity to which that is set up. There's literally a chapter in here that comes from, if I'm correct, the Empire's Handbook. You have a bunch of chapters in
Love
here
those
that are
chapters. I
Oh,
love
yeah,
those
yeah.
bits.
Yeah.
and it literally lays out, piece by piece, like who's in the first estate, who's in the second estate, and all the way down. And you get different layers of those kinds of things about how power is structured here. And it seemed to me that this was a book that is, even though it is about the people that are not necessarily part of that larger power structure, at least not directly, they are part of it in the sense that they live within it and they are, whether they want to be or not, unwitting participants in it. Their book is also very much showing us how these sort of imperial systems are structured, the rigidity with which they're structured, and all the consequences that come with that rigid structure, for good
Right.
and for bad.
Right, and when things go south, how people start scrambling, like the intended scrambling when suddenly he's confronted with the road being blocked, and now what are you going to do with the prince? It's fascinating how it breaks down.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that he can't hear what he doesn't want to hear. It's just he won't take anyone. He's like, well, you must be lying to me. He doesn't, he's just, I was told this, so why are you saying that? And those ways in which people make decisions based on who's telling them the information and who, it's like, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And yeah, so I played with that a little bit too. I also think that, the United States has long been an empire. I don't know how long that's going to last now, but we'll see. But we think of our society as being very fluid and open, but there's a lot of inbuilt rigidity here as well. It's just these are rules that they're not written down and they're not spoken, but people more or less adhere to them. And that's true of every society. People adhere to these unspoken rules, these customary actions and expectations. And I happen to really like dealing with that in fiction. Not everybody does, but I really love it.
Well, that's interesting because in the way that you've set up this empire, so there's a moment when you have, I don't know if we want to necessarily talk about Elle's backstory per se, but there's a moment when someone who knows her from a different life, as it were, shows up, and she makes this great observation, which is that when the princes of the empire are moving through the empire to go do whatever they're doing, the like higher end of the folks stay at the front. Right, they're always at the front of the column of the caravan, because that's where they belong, and then it just kind of descends backwards, and so that rigid structure is held. But this other side, they sit in the middle, and so their statuses move outward and around. And part of that's because of one of the issues that's in the society is the spores, which I'm sure we'll come to. And so you have this interesting interplay happening where you're seeing different ways that people value their position and the lives around them, and what that does to seemingly innocuous things like how you walk with your attendants.
One of the things that most frustrates me is both in fiction, especially in fantasy and specifically in fantasy and science fiction, because there's so much possibility in fantasy and science fiction, but also just when I see sometimes with Americans traveling, it's just this inability to understand that things are done differently in other places. And it's not that one way it's not good or bad, it's just different. It's right for that society. Is it good? Is it a good thing overall? Maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know, right? But just this, it's almost, some people seem to have this inability to accept that their way of looking at the world isn't the only way, and people are literally baffled. I've seen people be baffled when they find out that that this thing that they assume is this way is done differently elsewhere. And it's like, Maybe it's because people haven't traveled. Maybe it's because they don't think about things outside. Maybe it's because my mother's an immigrant. So I grew up in a household where we did things differently than other people did. And so from a very young age, I was aware of that split, that not everybody did things the same way. And I often think that one of the reasons I love to write about cultural interaction, cultural conflict, cultural change, and how things, how it's done this way, and that way over there, is because of that experience, is growing up as the daughter of an immigrant and the granddaughter of, and then on my dad's side, his grandparents were all immigrants. So I come from a very hyphen American background. And so that's given me that kind of split view of the world, that there's the world here, but then there's this other world over there.
Interesting. I don't have a follow-up to that, because that is a really interesting observation that this book does seem to tease out. I think early in the book, primarily by showing the differences in the way power is manifested. And then I think it gets more complicated later in the book.
Yeah.
That is very interesting.
Once we at the end find out where Ellen is from and how things are very different there than in the Empire or in the Borderlands, and they react to the spores, the Paul, very differently. I wrote this down, so I want to mention it. It kind of reminds me of Octavia Butler's Wild Seed, in that we don't find out where Doro is from or how he got his powers to the last chapter of the book. Just like we don't find out where Ellen and A.o. were really from till the end of this book, and then you hit us with it, and then it's kind of like opening the book to understand where she's come from and why she's the way she was at base. I mean, a more traditional narrative would have had that as front matter, but you have it as the back matter. It's like the present at the end, so that we can completely unlock Ellen as a character. I really appreciated that.
So, but think about it though, because if I had put that in the first couple chapters, everyone would have read it and gone, oh, that sucks. And then they would have kept reading. But when it's dropped in at the end, now you've had a whole book to get to know her. You've had a whole book to watch her interactions with other people, a whole book of her thinking about her sister. It isn't her sister, Al, who is, it's not a spoiler because she's been dead a couple years at the beginning. A whole book of interacting with her nephew and this thing that's going on between them, because he's mad at her for actually perfectly good reasons, but because you've had all of that time. Then when you drop that, it's essentially a flashback, even though she's telling us with the flashback in, I think it hits harder.
It does.
I think the material hits harder, and I think if I had just let it be up front, it would have just been, I mean, really, that's how we do it. Because as a writer, our job is to get readers, my job is to get readers to feel the impact, to be immersed. Some writers write more like intellectual fiction, where you're getting attached to the idea and thinking, oh, how cool is that? Oh, I never thought of that before. Ooh, what if they, we're on the edge of a civilization on the edge of a black hole or whatever, right? I don't know. But my job, I want people I want them to feel that they live in the world, that they really could walk through this world. And I want them to feel what the characters feel, and to care what happens to the characters, such that when something good happens, they're happy for them. And when something bad happens, they're like, oh, no, right? And I also want them to maybe get things right before the character does. Mm-hmm. So something might happen. And I feel like if something happens and the reader goes, oh, shit, right? That's great, because it means I've set it up well so that they're getting the jokes that we would get with a stand-up comic, right? This is kind of an odd analogy, but when we watch stand-up comic, if I see an Australian comic, there's some jokes I'm not going to get because they're so specific. If I see an American comic, I will get most of the jokes. Maybe there'll be a few I won't get. If that are specific, subculture specific or topic specific, but in general. And so think of a book, especially science fiction and fantasy. In a way, you're creating a world, and that you want people to become insiders in that world, not outsiders. Because if they're outsiders, you have to explain everything to them. But if you can make a joke in the book, and you can't do it in the first chapter. And that's why, when people say, well, it took us a lot of time, there was a lot of world building, right? Well, but that's because I get it. And I get that some people don't want that, which is fine. It's totally fine for people not to want that. But what if you can spend 25 chapters doing world building and then drop a joke in that you don't explain, but the reader gets it?
Yeah.
Man, like chef's kiss to me. That's to me, that means I've succeeded. If the readers get the joke that I have no context on, but the context came from everything they read up to that point.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with feeling with, finding out about this backstory and really feeling it in the same way her nephew feels it. Because again, if I just put it up in front, one of the things about that sequence at the end is that this is something he's hearing that's a spoiler, I guess. But, so I want that. And it wouldn't have worked as well earlier. It would have been softened. It would have been more shallow.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more interesting if we know there is a backstory for Elle, but we don't, by not having all of that at the beginning, we really don't have anything at the
we know
beginning.
there's some,
we sort of get pieces
but not as
of
much.
it.
Yeah. As we've revealed, we think we know what came before with her past coming, some of her past coming to haunt her, but we don't know that it's actually even deeper than that. And then wham.
Yeah.
It's
like a mystery.
I actually,
yes.
Yeah, that chapter I wrote, I don't know that I wrote it in one day, but I probably wrote it in 2 days. It's really long. It's like, it's a novelette all by itself. But I couldn't split it in half. It had to be like chunked right there. So the other thing about that, because this is a duology, the other thing about where it comes is it comes in the middle. If you think of the duology as one entire story, it comes right in the middle. Which, of course, so that ends up being the end of book 1. But also, it also functions as the middle, because now in the second half of the book, you're informed by new things about her, things you didn't know before. You understand her better than you did before. Yeah. So everything that now happens in the second half, or in book 2, coming in
November, pre-order.
November, yeah. Everything that happens in book 2 now is informed by that.
Yeah.
So that's one reason. That's why it's there. Those are the 2 reasons it's there.
Duology is a really interesting way of structuring a story to me, because typically is the wrong word. Many times, fantasies are often like trilogies or many books. And
I'm seeing duologies. I'm seeing them more lately.
Yeah.
I don't know why, whether it's a publishing constraint. Or let's ask our author. So why?
Well, that's what I was going to get to.
An author? Yeah.
Well, to be quite honest, this book is a duology because it was long, and I'm not Brandon Sanderson. So they said, we'd like to buy this, but we'd like to buy this thing you turned in, but we need to publish it as 2 books. And if you agree to that, then we're good. And I'm like, sure, It did allow me to fill in some things that I had wanted to put in but had left out because they were too long. So in the second half. So that was good. So that's why this is a duology. This is essentially one very long novel split into 2. The other reasons, and so a certain number of duologies are going to be that. I think that you see duologies in young adult, and I think that's partly because, I don't know, I'm kind of guessing. I think so partly it's length. Nobody wants a really long young adult novel, with very rare exceptions. They really want to split them up to be shorter reads, because there's a perception that younger readers don't want to read a big chunky book, right? Is that true or not? I don't know. But I think that perception is true in addition to any issues of cost, because obviously a longer book, a Brandon Sanderson, what's the name of his series?
Way of Kings.
Thank you. Those books are huge. the paper costs a lot. The production time is going to be, 2 to 3 times longer than for another book. But he sells a lot of copies. So they're going to make enough money on him that the extra amount of money it's going to cost to produce those books, they're still going to make a profit. But if someone is selling at a more modest level, they're not going to publish a 450,000 word book. They're going to say, can you split this into a trilogy? Not because they're money grubbing, but, well, maybe they are that too. I don't know, but also because it's just a cost issue. If you're selling 1,000,000 copies of something versus selling 10,000 copies of something, there's a cost issue in there. You're not making the same amount. So partly it's that. I think also in some cases, someone will like write a book and it'll have kind of an end to it. And then they'll feel like, hey, this was popular. Let's write a second installment. Maybe someone didn't have like a series. Maybe they didn't have like a series in mind, and maybe they don't quite have a trilogy worth of material. So there might be like a second part of it that isn't like an exact, not like one book split into two, but here's the first thing that they did, and then here's another thing that they did, and together these make a duology, but they each kind of stand alone. So I don't know. Those are thoughts I have, but I'm not in the boardroom. I'm not in the editorial room. I'm not in the marketing room. I'm just speculating like we do.
I think that's fine. Yeah. Let's talk about spores. So one of the backdrops in this world is there are these things called spores, which are basically like evil fungus that mutates and does horrible things to anything it touches. And this world is like afraid of these infestations emerging. As Paul has said in chat, there is a fungus among us.
A friend of mine calls it the ravenous fungal ghost plague.
Oh,
Yeah, don't lie detected.
Yeah.
I like it. So I guess my question is, why fungus would be part of that question. What was the sort of narrative impetus? Like what kind of inspired you as you were working on this world that this would be this sort of almost like a natural backdrop of a threat?
So that's an interesting question because it doesn't really have an answer. I didn't consciously come up with this.
Oh.
I will say that a few years ago, I wrote a story for an anthology called The Book of Dragons. And I had been toying with, for some reason, I had this vision in my head of a place where parts of the countryside had been infested with what in the book it's called the pall. So imagine if there's a low-lying mist, and I grew up in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and where the fog can be very dense and where it will settle into hollows, right? And it may stay there for some time. So I think that image was in my head because it's something I saw a lot growing up. And so I just had this vague thing in my mind, and this is often how world building starts for me. I just have like stuff floats in and out, and then I get kind of attached to a vision or an image, and it latches on hard enough that it'll kind of stuff will start sticking to it, and then that's usually where the world's eventually built out from. And in this case, it was this idea of like, what if there were roads? Because I love roads, like I'm road obsessed, right? What if there were roads and then there were like a countryside that used to be populated, but now there were like places where this mist hung, and so no one could live there because it killed everything. But the road still went through it, and you could go on the road, or maybe you couldn't go on the road. And why would you be able to go on the road? I mean, this is like right there. So when I wrote this story called The Long Walk for the Book of Dragons, I toyed with this idea. So there's a point in the story where the character comes to a kind of an escarpment and looks out over this view of this country landscape that she's never seen before. And she sees this kind of got this low-lying mist in it. And there's a sense that these demons, which are filled with poison and stuff, come out of there, and that nothing can live there anymore. But that something used to live there. You could see cities, the remains of cities there. So that was all I did with that, right, in the story, because the story doesn't go there, because it had a different purpose. So I wrote that, and I didn't really have anything more I wanted to say about the society she was from or whatever. I didn't see that as like expanding into anything else. But that thing about the roads and this low-lying mist just stuck with me. So then I started poking at some other ideas. So first I had a story that began with a, a woman who's a surveyor, but there was another situation in that story that I wrote like 10,000 words of that. And then I decided that I didn't like it. I didn't like what I was doing, where it was going with it. But it had this thing where there's parts of, imagine like you're going on the Silk Road and there's parts of the route that used to be able to go on, you can't anymore because they have this low-lying mist that sits there. And eventually, as time passed, I circled back around to that and ended up with Ellen and the pall. And the pall is this low-lying mist. It isn't like fog because it doesn't rise high, it settles. It's right where it's all settled on lower ground. And I don't know where spore came from, probably because I've been reading a bit about fungus, which is really interesting and kind of creepy. Do you know what fungus does to things?
I know
Like
some
it
of it.
rips it apart.
Yeah.
It rips it apart in a way that, if we could see it larger, right, would be like quite unpleasant, right? And I don't know, for some reason that intrigued me and I thought that would be cool. So that's where the spore comes from. And then once I had the pall and the spore, then I had to think about how long has it been around? Was the empire here before? Okay, the empire was here before. Then the pall and the spore came up for reasons no one knows. That's not a spoiler. No one knows. And how would an empire that's already fairly top down and bureaucratic learn to deal with this existential threat so that people could, by and large, continue to live their lives and not be, frantically battling it and living on the edge all the time? And so, to me, one of the interesting things is that because the empire is so bureaucratic and so controlling, they've found a way to mostly keep things under control, to let the business of empire, the movement of people, farming, daily life, mostly go on, even though this stuff could be anywhere. I just find that dichotomy to be interesting. Yes, it's a very controlling empire. Yes, they're actually pretty much able to have ordinary life, even though this terrible thing could happen at any moment. And so, after I wrote partway through writing the first draft, I realized I had to put in very early a scene where you really saw what spore was. You had to see it, like visually with your own eyes. You had to see what it did, because otherwise it would just be this abstract threat. You had to be an actual threat. So the poor mouse, I'm sorry. No mice were actually harmed in the filming of this movie.
I love that you brought up the bureaucracy and dealing with this, as you say, existential threat, the spores, because one of the parts that I found very interesting very early in the book, when we first see the prince's caravan, is there's like a town that they like intentionally made the road go around this plot, because I guess the spores can't cross these like holy roads. They're made out of a material that I guess it can't cross. And so this town springs up at the middle of this road that goes around, which made me immediately think of, like, if you've ever I think of this in Florida, when I was driving in Florida, where they would have the rest stop in the middle of so the highway would just go around the rest stop. Sans, like, I guess, alligators coming to eat you at the rest stop would be the Florida version, I guess. And so,
I mean, they could still, unless there's a fence, but right.
Yeah.
But you would have to cross the road and not get hit.
Yeah, which harder for an alligator. Probably the spores could. I mean, it'd have to go underneath the road, but
but see, then that becomes part of the whole business of hierarchy and power. Who's best protected? The people who can live
in the halts,
right? They're called halts, right? And those who can't live close to them.
Yeah.
And those who can't live a little farther out. So there's all these, but then you see as they go up through the hills. So they have this long walk, this long hike through many days of hiking through the hills. And you see how the little tiny villages and the bigger villages and the towns, how they protect themselves. And there's all different layers of how protected they are. And that's all, obviously it's a metaphor for life.
Oh, yeah.
For our own lives. Who's protected? Who isn't? Everybody has to live with it. Whatever it is, whatever pall and spore is on some larger level, on some metaphorical level, right? We all live with it.
Yeah.
Some people really are less likely to encounter it because everything protects them. Other people are kind of out of luck, right? Just hope for the best.
Hope there's an owl
It
around
really,
to kill the mouse.
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most fascinating parts about the book to me is exactly what you're describing. That the sort of natural hierarchy that emerges as a consequence of this. I'm saying natural problem, the spores. It's a little bit more complicated, but like that is sort of like how close you would live to like the levee, for example, or whether you live in a
Exactly.
flood zone. Yeah.
Exactly. Whether, and can you even get insurance, right? Now people can't get insurance because, so if their house gets taken out by a hurricane, too bad. This story is, I mean, is a story about character and people, and it's also a story about hope and loving life, even when things can be bad, finding things to love about the smallest things in life. And it's also a story about power and who's protected and who isn't. So I just stuffed a lot of things. I stuffed a lot of things that I think are stuffed in a lot of my books.
I
like
did
my
put that
big
in the
concerns.
in my review. Yes, you put a lot of the things you love and I come to expect in your books into this book. This is definitely a book that
Yeah.
is very
Yeah.
very Kate Elliott book. We haven't even
Yes.
talked about Kem yet, and I want to talk about
Yeah.
Kem because Kem is such a fascinating
Oh,
character
Kem.
for the how you interrogate choice of identity with Kem, which is kind of very relevant, suddenly very relevant in this day and age.
It is,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
So
So I want to say one of the, interestingly, I didn't sit down and say, I'm going to write a trans character. I started writing the book and I said, okay, Ellen's, I'm starting with Ellen and she's walking along and I thought, and she has, oh yeah, her nephew's with her because I wanted her to have, I didn't want her to be alone. I love, I love dealing with family, whether it be blood family, found family. And interactions, relationships. It matters to me that people have relationships. So I started writing it. And within like 2 or 3 pages, it just out of nowhere, it was like, oh, he's trans. Okay. So then I had to think about how can that be? And what does that mean? And that's when I thought, well, okay, I already knew I didn't want to use prince and princess. I knew that I wanted the emperor to be able to be male or female and that it wouldn't matter. But I didn't want to use, so therefore, I didn't want to use gendered titles because that changes it. A prince and a princess aren't the same, at least not in English. People may say they are, and people may be reclaiming things, but they're not. So once I did that, that meant that this society has a lot of hierarchies and status markers. Many of them, huge numbers of them, but gender isn't one. And as soon as I put that in place, it just changed a lot of things. So it also meant that a young person could walk to the town, whatever, I can't remember exactly what it is in the book. They'll walk like to the altar at the Heart Temple and say, I declare that I am. And everyone's like, okay. And that's that, done. There's actually at least one other trans character who appears in the book, but since it's not an issue, there's no way to present it. It will probably.
is it in the second?
There's no way to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh no, it's not in this book. It's in the next book.
I haven't read the next book yet.
Spoiler.
Sorry. But it doesn't matter. You've heard about this character, but this character is a known character. But anyway, it's so then with Kem, I had to do the thing in terms of the trans, Kem being trans. So first of all, I had to figure out how am I going to introduce it without being clunky and kind of offensive about it. So I felt, I said, okay, I have the 2 things I'm going to deal with, the 2 ways I'm going to do that. And then it ended up, because I didn't plan this in advance. I didn't write this book with a ton of outlining ahead of time. It's like it was like I was transcribing something. It's a very unusual experience for me. I don't usually write like this. But it's like I started writing it, and then it was just like, okay, okay, that happened. Oh, okay, that happens next. I don't usually work like that,
Oh.
but it's like I just like bam, bam, bam. I just wrote it through, and everything is like I never hit a point where I said, oh, now what I'm going to do. It was just like, oh, okay, that's going to happen next. But I didn't plan it out. So the whole thing with the Lord who arrives and the stuff that happens with that was like almost a fortuitous coincidence. It was like, oh, hey, this makes a great
Oh,
plot
yeah.
point
Mm.
for reasons that will be, be present throughout, right? So that worked out really well. And then the other thing about Cam, and the thing that I really, 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 really wanted to do was I wanted to write a 17-year-old who is a 17-year-old. They're not like the best assassin in the world.
Yeah.
And they're not fixated solely on whether or not they're going to go to the prom. They're like, I don't know, like my kids. They're like super cool and intelligent and thinking about stuff, and they're kind of sulky and difficult. And they mix through this whole thing all the time. He doesn't have all the answers, but he's also smart and thinking about stuff, He has plans for the future, maybe that he hasn't shared. He's like, and he has his own internal life that maybe not, I don't know. I wanted to write someone who I felt had all those teenage things. He doesn't have to be led around by the adults, and he doesn't have to lead around the adults.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to write that character kind of as a tribute to teenagers who I think are pretty cool and also sometimes really obnoxious.
True, of adults as well.
Well, yeah, but
we're differently
but
obnoxious.
There's less of a but there's less of a stereotype about adults.
That's true.
I think that there's this sense, with perhaps unfairly, I sometimes feel like in literature that teenagers are written more narrowly because there's these expectations of how they have to be.
Yeah, I get it.
Whereas adults can be anything. We can have anything with adults. And actually, there's an interesting corollary to this, because when I was younger and books, at least the science fiction fantasy I was reading, men could be anything, but women were more constrained in a narrower set of roles. And I see that a little bit with teenagers, with age, teenagers. Younger kids actually maybe have a little more, but teenagers is like they're almost a type. And teenagers aren't a type. They're people. They have just as much of a range of everything as anybody does. So
yeah,
that was my goal with him. And I wanted also, again, it was very important to me not just to write a really close relationship between Ellen and Kem, and aunt and nephew, but also through that relationship to get a sense of who this missing person is. This person, his mom, her sister, her Hanai sister, I guess we would say in Hawaii, but this person who is central to both their lives, who is now absent. And it's easy to have a book in which you say, oh, I miss my dad, right? But you never really, but then it's just an attribute. Like, I wear this funny hat and I miss my dad. But I wanted her to live in the book too, that who she was makes a difference. Like the ripples of her are still there.
On Kem and on Ellen, yeah.
And on Ellen, yeah.
Yeah, the way they talk to each other, the types of the times when Kem's mother, his mother shows up, or like memories of ways that she would behave or how she'd respond to things, and there's a freeness in the way they those memories come up in their conversations that I felt really, really was quite effective at giving me a sense of who this character was. So I think in that respect, you actually succeeded, because I felt like I knew who this character was, even though I've never met them in the story. Thank
you. I also wanted to write someone who, although we never meet them, the reader should be able to tell that they have basically, I'm going to guess PTSD, right? That they are a person who is deeply traumatized and then kept living as well as they, found a purpose in life and did their best, right? Not always perfectly, as none of us do, right? But that they continued on.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, we got time for one more question, and I've talked a lot, Paul.
Yeah, but I didn't want to ball hog because I could have ball hogged this interview very easily, so I was not going to. So more of a general world building question. I mean, we touched on the roads. I wanted to ask you about your development of some of the small things we see, like that we only see like bits, like the ruins or like say the corpse of the griffin. Like, why? I mean, you've had giant eagles, but why griffins? And just like, I mean, because you make this melange of interesting worlds, not from the ground up. And it's just interesting about the pointy bits that we only see bits of, and how you came to add them to the story, and why, and will we see more of them in the next book?
Well, of course, roads and ruins and remains of lost empires, and things that happened in the past that we don't really know. I just love that
Oh,
stuff.
your Central
And I'll
Asia trip,
never.
yeah.
Well, not just that, but just in general, it's true in Europe too. And the book that kind of catapulted me. I was writing before I read Lord of the Rings at the age of 13, but that was the book that really kind of catapulted me into, like, I gotta try to find a way to create worlds that will make me, feel the same way that this did, right? Not to compare myself to Tolkien, but so, for example, in the first film, Fellowship of the Ring, that scene where he captures so perfectly when they go through the Argonath,
Mm-hmm.
right, with standing there with their hands out, like
Yeah.
I'm always like, oh my God, I have to have this stuff. I always like to have, oh, I need old ruins, like they have to be mysterious or powerful or whatever, right? I just love that stuff, and wow, I think it mostly shows up in probably almost everything I
Yeah.
write. Partly because it's true in the world, right? Is there basically everywhere you find, in one way or another, the remains of those who came before. The griffin, I think that griffins are a creature. I wanted a couple of creatures. I also mentioned the sarpa, which we don't see in book one, but you can have hopes for book two. The griffin is just, I needed something that could fly, and it couldn't be a giant eagle, and it needed to be a legendary animal.
I'm
So
big on
not a
griffins,
not a
so
hang not a hang glider,
it's like,
not a hang glider. I'm sorry that the only one we see is
yeah,
this
I am sad. Like,
that
poor
situation. Yeah.
Smurfs Griffin.
So it's that thing where this happens to me a lot, actually, in world building and writing, whereas I get really into when I'm going to say the reality of it, even though it's not reality, and that I have to remember, like, I need to remember, that there need to be enough magical elements that it isn't just, I need that extra sense, that extra layer, that extra dimension. So, and also, probably when I was writing that opening scene where she said, well, but she didn't, she had to walk everywhere because she didn't have a griffin. So they probably just comes from me going, she had to walk everywhere because she doesn't have a horse, and she doesn't have a griffin. So she can't ride and she can't fly because they don't have any other means of flying. They're a culture that has pocket watches and, like, Tinder. You can, like, not matches, but the whatever came before matches, and spyglasses, but they don't have, but they're not full on industrial revolution. They're in that, like, that woodgy place between. They have mechanisms, but not industry.
Yeah.
Interesting. And you
Yeah.
mentioned a little earlier the fact that the world, right? Like, we keep finding little bits and baubles of civilizations that are gone, and it reminded me. I haven't done any real extensive research on this, but I remember seeing that in May of this year, there was a 3,000-year-old Mayan complex with canals and pyramids and stuff found in Guatemala, which I say found because I assume it's just like people forgot about it because someone knew about it at some point. but
Right.
it's that reminder, like, there's all kinds of stuff that's probably there that we just
All
like
that.
have forgotten about.
The jungle grew over it, the populations moved, and it's everywhere. They said we don't know what's out in the Sahara, which used to be much greener.
Yeah.
You know,
Who knows? They're finding stuff about Neanderthals that we didn't even know, like, when I was a kid. Like, they might maybe engage in burial practices, and, like, they might have had music, like, all kinds of stuff, you know?
it's history is incredible because people, and I'll call Neanderthal people, we're
I
closely
think there were
related.
people.
Sorry, it reminds me of that song by which group? People are people. So how should it be that you and I should get along so awfully? But anyway, that's who is that by? Anyway, I'll look it up. But people are all the way back doing all this stuff. And it's just, a lot of it just gets swept away. We have so much stuff online now how much of that, like, people talk about that, like, it's just going to be like a dark ages in the future. They'll look back to this time and like, there's no information about these people because it all just like poof vanished when the computers all went down, or when they upgraded to some new system and nothing got saved. So I also just love the idea of the mysterious past. And that is also something that plays a role in the Witch Roads. There is stuff that happened in the past that people aren't sure about. The poets have a lot of stories about it, but we don't really know. Although we do have a character who theoretically knows
Some things, but not everything.
But maybe, well, yeah,
He's such an interesting character. I'm interested in him too.
I love him. Someone complained. I'm sorry, I try not to read reviews, but usually I read a few reviews early on just to see how it's being received. And someone complained that they didn't use the word smarmy, but I think it's a good thing. And I thought, he's not, oh, that's a spoiler.
Oh, oops.
I can't say that. He's not who you,
He's not.
He's not who you think he is.
It's like it's like for him, it isn't. He's coming from a different
point of view.
Place. He's coming from a different point of view. Yes. Yeah. He's coming from a different perspective.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, he's coming from a different perspective. So he was a lot of fun to write, and he was very easy to write. And I have to say, when I did an interview with Shivam Bhatt, and he brought this up, and I was happy he did. Probably my favorite scene, and since we're at the end of the episode, if someone wants no spoilers at all, they can like cover their ears right now for 1 minute or 30 seconds. But and I have a lot of favorite scenes in book one, but probably my favorite scene is on the, I don't know, second or third day, where they're walking along and they find that whole village has come up, right, to line the road to see the prince. Be the only time in their whole lives that they will ever be this close to someone. And then they keep coming, whether it's rain or shine, they keep coming up to stand to see him. And that to me is, I don't know, that means a lot to me because I don't believe in kings. Like, I am over kings, no emperors, no aristocracy. It's all bullshit to me, right? As an American. But this isn't America. This world isn't America. It's their world. And to them, that is something deeply meaningful. And then, of course, it plays into the different reactions of the people in the party, including his reaction and how he responds to it, how Ellen responds to it, because she understands where the villagers are coming from. And the captain, who's like, we don't have time for this, right? And then the haunt, who's like, what the heck is going on? So, and how he responds. Anyway, I love that sequence. That to me is a bit in terms of world building where you see the world through the eyes of those who live in it, not through my eyes.
Well, I think that means we have to start the closeout process.
We do.
Okay.
Because we could keep going, but we can't because people have lives. Because people are people with lives. Okay. My awkwardness.
Yes. No, it was good. It was good, Sean.
Okay, I'll take 3 points. So we'll start with one big one, which I think we already kind of know what you're working on next because it's coming out in November. Although how much you're working on it at this point maybe is.
Oh, it's long gone.
So what are you working on next?
Yeah.
Lady Chaos?
Well.
Yes, hopefully.
Well, Lady Chaos is about half done. I'm actually working on something different that I'm about done with, and I'm supposed to turn in on at the end of this month. So, but it hasn't been announced yet. It might be something set in the Witch Roads world, but it hasn't been announced yet.
Okay.
Although it is under contract. So that's all I can say. That's something that I knew could be followed up quickly. So not as long and complicated. And then, as I said, Lady Chaos is about half done. So that's sitting waiting for me to jump back to it.
Cool.
So
excellent. And then if folks want to find you and your books, where would they go?
I have a website called you can either go to kateelliott.com two L's, two T's, or to imakeupworlds.com. It goes to the same place. It's not kept that current, but there's not a lot on it, just mostly my bibliography and, and then Blue Sky at Kate Elliott SFF on Blue Sky. I am on Instagram, but I never post there. I mostly do it to keep up with like my niece and nephew, a few friends who are on it. So Blue Sky, mostly my webpage, Blue Sky. I have a Patreon where I am currently writing just one chapter a week of a story that I make in a brand new world that I'm making up as I go along, which has been actually kind of challenging. But and then it has a lot of posts about writing craft and photo of my dog.
I love the photos of Finn.
Very cute white schnauzer. Yeah, every week. That's my Patreon, and I have a newsletter, which if you go to my website, you can find the link to the newsletter. And that newsletter is free, and it's just news. Like if I have an announcement or if I have news or links to, say the replay of this podcast, those go on there.
Perfect. Well, Kate, thank you very much for taking time to talk to us on our ridiculous show.
Yeah.
This is
and I want to thank Craig as well.
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, Craig, our recording bot. He listened. I don't even know that he is the right word. It's a bot.
Yeah. We shouldn't misgender Craig unnecessarily. It's true.
I mean, Anyway. All right. Well, folks at home, this gets us to the end of the show. So again, if you'd like to let us know what you thought, if you have read this book or you just like Kate Elliott's books, obviously you should let Kate Elliott know that you love her books by going to Blue Sky. But then you can also email us at skiffyandfanty@gmail.com. Or if you're in our Discord, you can also talk about the episode there. If you thought anything interesting came up, we'd love to hear what you thought. If you want to find our show, we are on all of the social channels that aren't evil, or at least totally evil. And you can find links to all that in our YouTube channel and whatnot at skiffyandfanty.com/skiffythings. And then remember, every Friday, 7 p.m. Central, we will be here on Twitch at twitch.tv/alphabetstreams for a live show format for whatever we happen to be recording that day. And then if you like what we do, please, patreon.com/skiffyandfanty. It's $1 a month is the absolute minimum, and you get all sorts of cool stuff, and it helps us pay the bills when we get attacked by malware.
Indeed.
So there you go.
So, in keeping with that, I'd like to thank all our Patreon supporters. Andrea the Alluring, Cameron the Chthonic, Carolyn the Benevolent, Karin the Divine, Chris the Candescent, Dan the Transient, Daniel the Cultured, David the Debonair, JC the Jocular, Jeff the Gracious, Joseph the Jovial, Juan the Junctional, KB the Kind, Sean the God, Karen the Kickass.
Sean the God?
That's you.
That's not on here.
That's you.
I'm not a god, first off. I am a mortal man.
You say actual God as your name in this channel, so anyway, you should finish the list.
Is that actually on here? Oh, no.
No, I added it.
I think that's in my other Discord. Sorry.
That's your other Discord.
Stupid. I'm sorry.
Anyway,
other supporters, Kat the Kinematic, Matthew the Magnificent, Paul the Pious, Phoebe the Eloquent, Robin the Bold, Ryan the Resilient, Sarah A. the Sensational, Sarah E. the Sublime, Sarah O. the Rapturous, Scott the Gentleman, Stephen the Strange, Tari the Thorough, Tanya the Triumphant, Trish the Imperturbable, and Victor the Valiant. Thanks, everybody, for supporting the show. We appreciate it. If you want to find me, SeanDuke.net. Alphabet streams on here every Wednesday and Sunday at 6 p.m. Central. And then SeanDuke.net/DukeThings for all my links to stuff.
And you can find me, Paul. I'm ubiquitously on the internet, except in fascist duchies, kingdoms, and baronies, as Prince Justin with a V. PRINCEJVSTIN.
I like the new version, Paul. All right. As required by the Skiffy and Fanty bylaws, I must make it happy. And that is by letting Paul know that I am creating a benevolent form of spore that just improves people, makes them better.
That would work.
Yeah, a nicer version of a spore, and its subgenera will be Paulinus. I'll be naming it after you, Paul.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome. And on that note, awkward ending and scene. Or it's not awkward, it's happy ending.
Happy ending. Yeah, so we've done too many awkward endings. This is happy.
If you want to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/skiffyandfanty or skiffyandfanty.com, our website, where you can get access to all of our fancy things. Our music comes from Holy Mole. You can support him and his work at patreon.com/holymole. Thank you for listening.